Hi and welcome to Matt's Music. In today's episode we're going to be looking at how to start a CD collection from scratch in 2023. All the tips you need to get you started, and if you stick around till the end, I've got 5 album recommendations to get you going. CDs these days are cheaper than ever, they're available everywhere on the second-hand market, but because of that doesn't mean it's easy to build a CD collection. You can fall into a lot of pitfalls and end up with music that you won't listen to, don't like, takes up too much space, doesn't sound very good, isn't in very nice condition, the list goes on. I'm going to help you avoid all those minefields in this video. But first of all, let me apologise for the terrible sound quality. I'm using the onboard microphone from the camera. The reason for this is because even though in recent videos I've been using this nice microphone to give you better sound quality, tonight, for whatever reason, it wouldn't work with Audacity, it wouldn't work with GarageBand, it was throwing up all sorts of error messages. I've been trying to record this video for 3 hours straight, and I just want to get it out there and share this information with you. So please forgive the slightly scratchy audio. So first of all, let's talk about where to find CDs and some of the pros and cons of each one. I would say to start with, I have about 90% of my CDs that I buy these days from charity shops. The reason is because they're cheap. You can usually buy a CD from between 50p and £1 in most places. Occasionally, if it's a box set or a double album or something rare-ish, they will charge £2 for it. But mostly they're cheap. That's the pros. The cons are that because they're cheap, there is a danger of just going along and going and scooping the whole lot into the bag and going, yep, I shall have them all, because at 50p each, why would you not? I would say, particularly when you're starting out, but really at any point in your collecting journey, if you end up buying a load of stuff that you haven't heard of, but you think you might like because the album art looks good, or it's a band you've heard of and you think you should probably have them in your collection, but you don't really like them, you just feel like you ought to have it, you will end up with a bunch of stuff that doesn't really get played and just takes up an enormous amount of space on your shelf. And you might think, well, that's great. I want a wall of music like this because it looks cool. And yes, it does. And part of the thing we all love about our collections is looking at them, right? That's why we have them rather than hidden away on a screen, on a phone. We can shuffle through them. Better to have this. But it's even better to go up and know that all the stuff in that collection is stuff that you play and stuff that you love and stuff that you listen to on a regular basis. So yes, get things from charity shops. Yes, experiment and pick things up because they're interesting looking, but I would say it's about ratios. So you want 90% of the things, 95% of the things you're buying from a charity shop to be from bands you like, artists you like, things you're looking out for. Put a list together, of albums you really, really want. And then if you find, if you found 10 albums that you really like that day in the charity shops, and you find 1 or 2 that you just buy them because the cover art looks interesting, that's all right, but just don't buy 10 or 20 every time you go out that you may end up not listening to at all. Next one, I would say, in terms of the most frequently used places for buying my CDs, would be eBay and Discogs. This is more of a targeted approach. So unlike the charity shop where you're going out and hoping to find things, in the charity shops, you're in the eBay, on the eBay, and on the Discogs, you're going to be able to find specific albums that you've gone out and listened to, looked for. So it might be that you are looking to build up your Beatles collection, for example, or Rolling Stones, or whoever it happens to be. And so there's an album that you have in mind, and you can go in there and you can find it. So they're really, really good places. On the whole, they're usually also relatively cheap for most things. I would check both just to see, where the bargains are. But on the whole, expect to spend, for most albums, unless they're rare, 3, 4, 5 quid, something like that for an album. In some cases, a little bit less. And some sellers online will give you discounts. Like, for example, on Discogs, you usually pay for the postage from most sellers, but you'll get a discount maybe if you buy a load from them, and then it's just one shipping charge for everything. And if it's eBay, a lot of the places, the shipping is free, but you'll get discounts if you buy 2, 3, 4, 5 CDs at once from that one seller, because they can just wrap them up in one bundle, send it to you. Next thing I would say is have a look out and ask your friends, if they've got CDs taking up space in a loft or something that they're no longer using. It's a great way to sort of get a whole stack of stuff. That's the pros. You get a whole stack of stuff. But like I was saying, the charity shops only get a whole stack of stuff if it's stuff you really want. So if it's somebody whose musical tastes maybe only coincide with yours in spaces, and they give you 500 CDs, but you only actually really want 20 of those, you've then got 480 CDs that are then going to take up space. You've got to get rid of them somehow. Are you going to individually list them on eBay and send them off? Probably not. Are you going to end up dumping them in the charity shop? Yes, probably, but you're still going to heft a huge, heavy box of CDs, and they weigh a lot. A big box of CDs is heavy. Getting them in the car, schlepping them across the high street, chucking them in the charity shop, and coming back. It's like a whole thing. It's a whole thing, and you don't necessarily need that. So I would urge you to only do that if it's somebody whose music collection you absolutely love and you know that you're going to enjoy the vast majority of it. I had, in the early days of my collection, I was very lucky, a friend of mine who we grew up together as teenagers in the 90s, and so we listened to a lot of the same bands. And when I was looking to get back a lot of the stuff that I had back then, she owned a lot of those albums, and so when I got her collection of about 200 CDs, there was a lot of stuff that was on my wish list in that pile of CDs, so I was super happy with that. And there were a few things in there that I hadn't got but wanted, and just a few things that that I actually played a few times and ended up getting rid of because I didn't like them. But most of it was like, yeah, I really like that stuff. And I would say the same thing with Facebook Marketplace as well. You know, it's super tempting to go out because, you know, and buy somebody's whole collection because they're giving them away, literally in some cases for free, or, you know, at the very least they might want 10 quid or 20 quid for, like, you know, a bin bag full of CDs. And you might think, oh, that's fantastic, what brilliant value for money. But actually, if you're not going to listen to them, if it's not music that you want, but you only really want, say, 10 of those albums, you've got to dispose of the rest in some way. Don't put them in landfill, because other people might want to buy them, and, you know, your one man's trash is another man's treasure, and all that sort of stuff. At the very least, give them to a charity shop. But yeah, it's a hassle. I would say one of the best pieces of advice when you're starting out is start small. Yes, you want to get to a point where you've got sort of, you know, shelves and shelves of music, but don't think you have to do that on day one. Honestly, because there's only so many hours in the day you can listen to music, right? So, you know, what are you going to do? Listen to, like, you know, an album a day, a couple of albums a day, maybe 3, 4 if you know, weekends or something. But if you've got 1,000 CDs in the first week, you're never going to listen to them, frankly. Especially because that's not where it ends, right? You'll be buying more and more and more and more, and so you'll never catch up with the pile, and then you don't really know your collection. It's just stuff as opposed to music that you adore. So the next thing to look at is condition. You know, what to look out for when buying CDs, and to make a decision as to whether or not to buy them. Now, the obvious ones, of course, are the condition of the CD itself. If it's scratched, you know, don't buy it. If the booklet and the sort of inlays and everything from the jewel case are in manky condition, probably give it a steer. Unless it's super rare and you're unlikely to find it somewhere else, then maybe get it until you can find a better copy or something. But try and make at least that stuff in good condition. What I wouldn't worry about is the condition of the jewel cases themselves. If they're cracked, if the little, like where you've got the insert tray where the CD sits onto it, those little spindly teeth, they snap off all the time, and then the CD rattles around. If any of that is the case, but the CD itself is in perfect condition, and the paper and the booklet and everything that goes with it, all the card and everything is in really nice condition, you can change that jewel case, right? You can just pull all the stuff that you want out, junk the jewel case, put it in a new one, or even do what I'm doing. When you end up buying a lot of CDs, as I've done, if you run out of space, you can put them in these little plastic wallets instead. Don't worry about that now. There's plenty of time to look at those things later. Although if you're at that point, go and watch the video I've got on my channel where I talk about the pros and cons of that. But anyway, that's the main thing. Ignore the condition of the jewel case. It's irrelevant. You can swap that out. It's easy. Digipacks are a different story though. If you've got a digipack, like this one, for example, you know, the actual, there's nothing to take apart here. This is the artwork. It's not protected by the plastic jewel case on the digipacks, and so just be aware of these corners and things, right? And you know, has anybody scribbled on the inside? Things like that. Is there a coffee stain in the middle of it? Because you can't get rid of that, and you're stuck with it. So that's a different story. But with the jewel cases, who cares, right? You can change those easily. How do you get CDs that sound good? How do you know? What's the thing to look for there? Well, there's a couple of things I would say. And they're sort of related to a degree. The first thing is it like the original one that came out on CD, or is it like a re-release from years later that is digitally remastered? I've got an example of that here. So this is Doggy Style by Snoop Dogg, and I've got two versions of it here. And they look more or less identical, but on this one you can see it says digitally remastered on the bottom, whereas this one doesn't say that, right? And this one came out earlier than this one. This was a re-release some years after this one. And this one came out in the teeth of what is known as the Loudness Wars, which will send shivers down the spine of any audiophiles listening, and just anybody that really appreciates the sort of dynamic range in music. Because what the Loudness Wars was, it was a period between the mid to late 90s up until around about the 2010s, something like that, where in order to get songs to pop on the radio and to stand out, what happened was that the way that they were mastered and mixed was to push all of the quiet bits in the music up so that they would be the same level as the loud bits, and then push all of that when it's all a flat line, so there's no quiet bits to lose your attention. They pushed all that volume up right up until the point where it just about wasn't kind of distorting because it was like, too loud, but it was like right up to that ceiling. And so it was compressed into this very thin band of dynamic range and cranked out as loudly as possible. And of course, then you lose all that ebb and flow that you get from the natural performance of the music. So, in a lot of cases, it really doesn't sound as good. It sounds loud, but it doesn't sound as good. It's better to get one that hasn't been digitally remastered. And if you want to play it loudly, just turn the volume up rather than have someone decide that all the quiet bits should be as loud as the loud bits, and everything should be as loud as it possibly can be without turning into a crunchy mess. So that's the first thing to look for. If you've got two options of an album to go for, try and get the original one. Most of the time, it's going to sound better than the remastered one. Another thing to look out for is the SPARS code. So you will see on a lot of particularly early CDs from the 80s and into the early 90s, there are 3 letters. There we go, on this one. There are 3 letters. If you can see there, it's particularly coming out that well, but there's AAD, it says on there. And the AAD, so A, the first A stands for analog recording. The second A stands for analog mixing, and then the D stands for digital mastering, because obviously it has to be digital to master it for CD, right? So AAD. So on a CD, the last letter will always be D. There's no choice. It's always going to be digital because it is digital. But the first 2 can either be Ds or As. So you can have something that's DDD, so it was digitally recorded, digitally mixed, and digitally mastered. Or you can have something which is analog recorded, digital mixed, and digital mastered. So that would be ADD. And then you've got occasionally, and it's very unusual, but you might even get DAD, DAD, so it would be digitally recorded, analog mixed for some reason, then digitally mastered. Ignore that one, it hardly ever comes up, but when you will see AAD and ADD and occasionally DDD, they will come up. What you will find is that this one, this is LA Woman by The Doors. So the album came out in like 1971. So obviously it was analog recorded because there wasn't digital recording in 1971, right? And it was analog mixed, which means that it's the original mix, right? It's using the original tapes that were mixed in the recording studio in 1971, right? If it's ADD, then what that means is that the analog recording, they've then taken those tapes and remixed them digitally, and in those cases they kind of added some of their own perhaps loudness or some other things to it digitally, which may or may not be as pleasing to you as the original recording. So a lot of people think that there is a higher fidelity to the original tapes from an AAD CD than there is an ADD CD. That's a lot of letters, isn't it? But I hope that makes some sort of sense. At any rate, look for AAD on your CD, and that will, again, usually, not always, but usually be a good recording. If it was well recorded in the first place, and that's a whole other story. But let's assume it was half decently recorded and mixed the first time. The next is, what should you buy? We've touched on this a little bit earlier, but I would say it's really important to emphasise this. When you're just starting out, don't think you have to go and buy everything just because you sort of think you've heard of them once and you think they might be a cool band and you should have them on your shelf because people are going to look at it and be impressed by you. No, don't do that, because the chances are you might not even like it. So what I would do is I would start with the albums by the bands that you absolutely adore now. There will be certain pieces of music that you absolutely love and have done since childhood. Go and get those. If you're starting a physical music collection for the first time, it's best to start with the things that you know you're going to love and you know you're going to get lots and lots of enjoyment from by playing a lot. So start there, and then you can sort of expand the sort of exploration out in all sorts of directions. So Maybe there's one particular album that you like by a band, but there's a whole discography of other albums that perhaps you don't know or haven't heard or don't know as well. So start to explore those. Maybe the band itself, some of the band members have gone off and joined other bands. Maybe there's side projects that they've done. People, they've maybe duetted with people or been involved in collaborations with other artists. Go and have a look at that stuff. Maybe there's a few bands in a particular genre that you really like, and so then you can explore who else was in that scene. Maybe sort of beyond the obvious and some of the sort of fringe bands that perhaps weren't as mainstream as the ones that you were looking for. Go down those rabbit holes and see who's interesting there. So that's a really fun one to do. Or even if you're just starting out, get all the mainstream ones that you kind of like grew up with and you loved. And it's like that you kind of like you want the full collection of everything that was 90s sort of skate punk and go down the whole rabbit hole of that. There's all sorts of stuff that you'll find. So I would say stick to that kind of stuff to start with, and sort of take little incremental steps out from where you are, and build up slowly your knowledge and passion and enthusiasm for all these different things. But also throw in the odd wild card for sure. It's worth grabbing the odd album just because you like the album art, or the title looks interesting or funny, or it's whatever, just grabs you in some way. Absolutely. But I would say, that should be like 1 in 10, right? 1 in 20. Because if you end up with too many of those, then they're all just weird and wonderful, and you don't really sort of know what you're in the mood to listen to, because you don't really know what any of it is or why you should care. So it's nice to have things that it's kind of familiar to a degree to you and that you're going to enjoy, and then mix in some other stuff every now and again, knowing that if you start your collection, you've got say 10 CDs or 20 CDs in your new collection, that like most of them that you're going to like, and then every now and again you can throw on something that's a bit more weird and wonderful just because why not, right? But stick to stuff and then just have little bits, and then you can explore it, because every now and again you will find something that you just buy randomly because you like the way it looked, and you'll put it on and you'll adore it, and then you can go down that rabbit hole of what other stuff that artist's done and other things in that genre and all that stuff. So that's really good. So inspiration, where do you go for inspiration beyond that? You've got the albums in your collection that you grew up with and that are your favourites. You're throwing in the odd one from time to time, and that's cool. But where do you start? Where do you from there to like build up a collection of things that you like? So here are a few of the things that I do on a pretty regular basis, and it's added a tremendous amount to the depth of my collection and the breadth of my interest in music. So the first one I use all the time is Shazam. Shazam, if you don't know, is an app that you download for your phone. It works on Android, it works on iPhone, and when you hold the little button down on Shazam, it will listen using the microphone in the phone to whatever music is playing ambiently around you. Could be something on the telly, could be something in a bar or a club, whatever it happens to be, on the radio, and it will tell you what the track is, right, and who the artist was. So then you can go and you can find it. So the other day, for example, I was watching an old episode of Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and there was a track on there, and I recognised it a bit, but I couldn't remember. I couldn't have told you in a million years who it was by. It was like an old, like 80s, early 90s hip hop track, and it turned out to be Slam by Back the F Up. I'll try not to get demonetised by saying the name of the album. But yeah, Slam was the big single, that would be the one, that came out of this album in, 1993, right? This album came out, so 30 years ago, and it was a brilliant song, and it was just a little bit of background music that came on during the show. Slapped Shazam on it, found that it was on this particular album, went on eBay straight away and ordered it, and then pressed play on Netflix and carried on watching the rest of the episode. A couple of days later, this turned up, and I was bouncing along to Onyx and Slam and having a fine old time. Another one I would say is, look at other YouTube channels. One of the reasons that I started this one is... it's fun to share my passion for music and all that stuff, but really the idea of sharing the passion is to give you ideas. So in every single video, I try to show albums, I try to talk about albums and artists and things like that, purely because me holding something up and talking about it for a little bit, that you may not have heard of them, and so you can go and check them out. You may have heard of them, but had kind of forgotten they existed. Or it may be something that you got already, but you think, I haven't listened to them for ages, and you'll put it put it on and play it. So that's really the whole point of this channel. So I listen to all sorts of, watch all sorts of other YouTube channels about music and other people's CD collections. And people are in doing music generally, you know, bands and you know, musicians and things. And there's a brilliant channel by a chap called Charles Bertrand, who is just a phenomenal virtuoso bassist. And in one video, he gave out a shout out to a Japanese rock band called Bandmade. And I hadn't heard of Bandmade before. They've actually been going years in Japan, but I'd never come across them. And so, yeah, again, there was a little clip of one of their videos from an album they did called Made in Japan. I wanted to go and buy that. They're quite hard to find in this country and quite expensive. And there was nobody in the UK selling one, and the ones that were coming over from Japan were like 400 quid. So I was like, all right, what else can I do? And I found this album, which is a little bit later than that. This is brand new made. I think this came out relatively recently. When did it come out? It doesn't say, but I think it came out within the last few years, and it's tremendous, and I really, really love it. The bassist on here is amazing. She's the vocalist in the band as well, and she's absolutely amazing. Really, really good. It's kind of like loud, like the earlier stuff that I listened to on Spotify on Made in Japan was a little bit raw. It was a little bit more like garage rock, kind of punky sounds. This is a little bit more sort of metal, a little bit more hardcore. Really, really fun, big loud bands. Absolutely love them, and so I discovered them by watching another YouTube, by watching stuff on YouTube, and so that's why I'm doing this, to help other people have that sort of joy of realisation of new music. But go and find other people's channels too, and you'll be amazed what you turn up. So that's tremendous. And the other one I would say comes up quite a lot is Facebook groups. So people talking about music online, and not necessarily sort of in a serious way either. There's a ridiculous Facebook group called Bad Album Art. And it's just, you know, usually kind of like just fairly disastrous stuff from like the 60s and 70s with people with unfortunate haircuts, unfortunate names and all that sort of stuff. But this particular album that I'm going to show you is doesn't fall into those categories at all. This is Roger Waters out of Pink Floyd. He did an album, I think it's his first studio album, called The Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking. It's kind of like, what would you call it? Like a sort of, sort of experimental, sort of proggy kind of album. It's kind of interesting in lots of ways. I like it. It's there's some good stuff on it. Takes a bit of getting into, a little bit like a lot of the Pink Floyd stuff. It's kind of like thinky music, but if you're in the mood for sitting down and quietly listening to the whole thing rather than having it on in the background, it's absolutely tremendous. This happened to be on that just because, you know, it's got a lady's bum on it and cover it up so YouTube doesn't think I'm sort of trying to corrupt the youth of internet. But that was why it was on there, so people were just giggling at that. But nevertheless, I saw that come up, saw it was by Roger Waters, didn't have it, hadn't actually heard of it until I'd seen it on there. I was like, oh, amazing. So again, got myself on Discogs, ordered a copy straight away. A couple of days later it turned up, and I've been playing it and enjoying it since. So there's all sorts of ways that you can just find inspiration out there if you let it come to you, and there are a few of my favourites. So I promised you I would finish this video with 5 album recommendations, and so I'm going to show you things that I have got in my collection that I absolutely adore, and I think a little bit maybe not the first things you would think of collecting, but you know, a little bit sort of, you know, buried deeper. You might come across these, so I thought if you want to check these out and you do like these, then you know, they're really brilliant ones to have in your collection. So number 1, Eva Cassidy, Live at Blues Alley. This album, this is she only did, sadly in her tragically short life, 1 studio album, Songbird, but this was a live recording that was done at Blues Alley in Chicago, which is a little blues club, and it's wonderful. Her voice on here is just magical, and the songs she has on this are just incredible. There's a lot of sort of like classic covers on here, so it's got Cheek to Cheek, Stormy Monday, Bridge Over Troubled Water, People Get Ready, Blue Skies, Tall Trees in Georgia, Fields of Gold, Autumn Leaves, Take Me to the River, What a Wonderful World. I mean, and just, you just cannot believe how good she sounds on this album and how beautifully it's recorded. It's bluesy, it's beautiful, it's excellently recorded. You know, you really feel like you're in this amazing club with her singing, and you're in the atmosphere of it. You can kind of hear people talking and moving chairs around and clapping and stuff. brilliant. Really, really recommend that. Next one is Paul Gilbert's Silence Followed by a Deafening Roar. If you're into like amazing guitarists, then check out this cat. He's just so good. He shreds all the way through this. It's bluesy. It's rocky. It's brilliant, and just gets you going. It's fantastic. Really love that. I only bought that recently actually. I'm just absolutely delighted to get it. Similar vein, a little bit more bluesy. Stevie Ray Vaughan. I love all of his stuff really, but Texas Flood is probably my favourite album, chiefly because it's got Texas Flood on it, which is one of my favourite songs. But there's some other really good stuff on there. Love Struck Baby I really enjoy. Testify is really good. Rude Mood is really good. Dirty Pool. There's so much stuff on there. Really good stuff. Totally worth having a look. And if you like it, pick it up and put it in your brand new fledgling music collection. Next up, this one I've talked about in a previous video in my top 10 most played albums of all time. This is Manu Chao, Clandestino. This is, it's kind of like, there's a lot of Latino beats in it. There's a bit of hip hop. He sings on it in all these different languages, taking all these sort of like cultural elements from the places where the languages that he's singing in are from, if that sentence made any sense at all. But he sings in like 6 languages on it. He writes all the songs himself. He performs all the music himself. He composed it all on like this little kind of crappy 10-year-old laptop and put all the tracks together himself. But it sounds amazing. Like, it doesn't sound like something someone put together to sort of like lying, on a beach or something, or wherever he did it. You kind of imagine him lying on the beach with his laptop writing all these music. I don't know but it was on a little laptop, and it sounds amazing, and it's fun, and it's bouncy. But there's also some really serious stuff on there. I struggle to translate most of it, but it's great. I mean, Bongo Bong, Clandestino, Je ne t'aime plus. All sorts of stuff. Just go and check it out, and if you like it, add it to your collection. All these things. Buy them on CD, own them if you enjoy them. Last one is a hip hop suggestion and or recommendation. Again, this came up in my top 10 albums I've played in my life. This is Dead Prez, Let's Get Free. I just love this. I love the beats on it. I love the lyricism in it. I love the sort of theme of the whole thing. Hip hop was the big single off this, but Day Schools, I'm an African, Police State, Behind Enemy Lines. You've got Animal in Man, which is the George Orwell Animal in Man copy, or like variant. It's like based on that sort of thing. But yeah, it's really cleverly done there. And the whole album is clever and thoughtful and lyrical and impassioned and political, and like really gets you going. It's absolutely amazing. Let's Get Free by Dead Prez. So again, with any of those ones, check them out, and if you like them, stick them in your brand new CD collection. So that's it from me. As always, please subscribe, and thank you to all those that have. In my video yesterday, I said I was trying to get to 100 subscribers. I was on 91. Today I'm up to 120, so I'm just so grateful to all of you who've joined me on this journey so far, and you'll be rewarded with another video tomorrow. Until then, see you later. Thanks for watching. Cheers.